The conference room at Thompson and Associates smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. My brother Derek stood at the head of the polished table, laser pointer in hand, walking through his quarterly presentation with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. I sat in the back row, laptop open, ostensibly taking notes. In reality, I was monitoring a system deployment across 3 continents while pretending to care about Derek's sales projections. As you can see, Derek gestured at the slide behind him, our revenue growth has been exceptional. 23% year-over-year, driven primarily by strategic client acquisitions and... Derek, one of the investors interrupted, a silver-haired man named Charles Whitmore. This is impressive, but we're concerned about your technology infrastructure. Your last cybersecurity audit raised some red flags. Derek's smile didn't waver. We're addressing those concerns. We've got IT people working on it. IT people? Another investor, a woman named Patricia Chin, leaned forward. Your company handles sensitive financial data for Fortune 500 clients. IT people seems vague. We have a solid team, Derek assured her. In fact, my own brother works in tech. He could probably explain it better than I could. Every head in the room turned toward me. I looked up from my laptop, meeting Derek's expectant gaze. Oh, don't worry, Derek continued, a patronizing note entering his voice. He's not part of our team. He does his own thing. Computer stuff, you know. Fixes servers, writes code, typical IT work. Charles raised an eyebrow. He's here because... Family support, Derek said with a laugh that made my jaw tighten. Mom insisted he come to at least one of my presentations. See what real business looks like, right, Alex? A few scattered chuckles around the room. I kept my expression neutral. What exactly do you do, Alex? Patricia asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Before I could answer, Derek jumped in. Like I said, computer stuff. He's been doing it for years. Never really moved up into management or anything, but hey, some people are just more comfortable with the technical side. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all, Charles agreed, though his tone suggested he found it slightly pitiful. I closed my laptop slowly, considering whether to correct Derek's characterization. But I'd learned years ago that sometimes silence was more powerful than words. Anyway, Derek clapped his hands together, redirecting attention back to his presentation. Let's talk about Q4 projections. We're looking at potentially breaking $30 million in revenue if we can close the Henderson deal. The meeting continued for another hour. Derek presented chart after chart, each one showing impressive growth, each one accompanied by his signature blend of charisma and carefully crafted confidence. The investors asked probing questions. Derek answered with the smooth assurance of someone who'd never encountered a problem he couldn't talk his way around. I sat in the back, watching, listening, and trying not to think about how typical this was. This was our dynamic, had been since childhood. Derek was the golden boy, charismatic, ambitious, destined for greatness. I was the quiet one, the nerdy one, the one who was good with computers, but lacked Derek's people skills, his drive, his star quality. Our parents had bought into this narrative completely. Every family dinner was a celebration of Derek's latest achievement, with occasional awkward attempts to include me in the conversation by asking if I'd fixed any interesting computers lately. The fact that I'd been running my own technology company for the past 8 years somehow never came up. Partly because I kept a low profile. Partly because they'd never asked. After the meeting, the investors filed out, shaking Derek's hand, offering congratulations and cautious optimism. Charles paused on his way out, glancing back at me. Nice to meet you, Alex. If you ever want to discuss enterprise security architecture, I'd be interested in your perspective. Thank you, I said simply. Derek waited until everyone had left before turning to me, still riding high on adrenaline. That went well, right? Patricia seemed really impressed with the Henderson numbers. It went fine. Fine. Derek laughed, loosening his tie. That was better than fine. I basically secured another round of funding. Did you see Whitmore's face when I showed him the growth projections? I saw. Thanks for coming, by the way. I know investor meetings aren't really your thing. Too much business talk, not enough technical stuff. He clapped me on the shoulder. But hey, Mom will be happy I included you. I stood up, tucking my laptop under my arm. Derek, about what you said. About the IT thing? Oh, don't take it personally. I was just explaining to the investors why you were here. They're not tech people either, so I kept it simple. Right. Simple. You know what I mean. Derek was already checking his phone, scrolling through messages. Anyway, I've got to run. Lunch meeting with a potential client. But we should grab dinner soon. I'll tell you about this new deal I'm working on. It's going to be huge. Sure, I said, knowing it wouldn't happen. Derek's invitations were always genuine in the moment and forgotten by the next day. He left in a whirlwind of confidence and cologne, already on a call before he reached the elevator. I stood in the empty conference room, looking at the residual glow of his presentation still projected on the screen. 23% growth. Impressive objectively. My company had grown 48% last year, but Derek didn't know that. Nobody in my family did. My phone buzzed. A message from my Chief Operating Officer, Jennifer Martinez. The data core merger is moving forward. Board wants your approval on the final terms. Also, Tech Summit confirmed you as keynote speaker. I typed back. Approve the data core terms if legal has signed off. And confirm the summit. Which topic did they want? The future of cloud infrastructure. Very you. I smiled slightly. Very me indeed. Another message came through, this one from my head of cybersecurity. Finished the audit for that financial services company, Thompson and Associates. Want the bad news or the terrible news? My smile faded. Give me both. Bad news. Their security is 5 years out of date. Terrible news. They're one breach away from losing every client they have. I'm surprised they haven't been hit already. I stared at the message, a knot forming in my stomach. Thompson and Associates. Derek's company. The one he'd just spent an hour assuring investors was solid and secure. How bad? I typed. Remember the Equifax breach? This would make that look like a minor inconvenience. They're storing unencrypted client data, their firewall is basically decorative, and their password protocols are a joke. Whoever set this up should be fired. Whoever's supposed to maintain it should be arrested. I closed my eyes, feeling a headache forming. This was the problem with keeping a low profile. Derek had no idea that the company he'd hired to do a routine security audit was mine. No idea that I'd personally overseen the evaluation of his infrastructure. No idea that his little brother, the one who fixed computers, was about to deliver news that could destroy everything he'd built. Send me the full report, I told my security chief. And set up a meeting with their leadership. This needs to be addressed immediately. Will do. But Alex, they're not going to like what I have to say. Nobody ever does. I packed up my laptop and headed for the elevator, my mind already racing through scenarios. Derek needed to know about this. But Derek also needed to understand exactly who was telling him and why that mattered. The timing, I realized, was almost poetic. After years of being dismissed as just an IT guy, I was about to become the most important tech person in Derek's life. Whether he liked it or not. 3 days later, I sat in a different conference room, this one in my own building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the table where Derek sat, flanked by his COO and his in-house IT manager. A nervous-looking kid named Brad who couldn't have been more than 25. Derek had been surprised when Atlas Technology Solutions had requested this meeting. He'd been even more surprised when he walked in and saw me sitting at the head of the table. Alex. He'd stopped in the doorway, confused. What are you doing here? I'm the CEO of Atlas Technology Solutions, I'd said simply. Please sit down. That had been 5 minutes ago. Derek was still processing, his expression cycling between confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been anger. You're the CEO, he repeated slowly. Yes. Of Atlas Technology Solutions. Yes. The company we hired to do our security audit. Correct. Brad, the IT manager, looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Derek, so, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret, was studying me with open curiosity. How long? Derek asked. I founded the company 8 years ago. We went from a 2-person startup to 150 employees. We're now one of the leading cybersecurity and cloud infrastructure firms on the East Coast. 150 employees, Margaret murmured. That's substantial. We've been fortunate, I said, which was a massive understatement. Atlas had been more than fortunate. We'd been strategic, innovative, and ruthlessly competent. But there was no need to brag. Derek was shaking his head slowly. 8 years. You've been running this company for 8 years and you never mentioned it? Not once. Would you have listened if I had? The question hung in the air. Derek's mouth opened then closed. He couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. If I'd told him, he would have smiled and nodded and immediately changed the subject back to his own ventures. My success would have been background noise to his story. Let's focus on why we're here, I said, opening the folder in front of me. Your company's security infrastructure is critically compromised. You're facing potential catastrophic data breaches that could expose sensitive client information and destroy your business overnight. Brad went pale. Margaret leaned forward. All business now. Derek just stared at me. How bad? Margaret asked. I slid copies of the report across the table. The full technical details are in there, but the summary is this. Your current system is vulnerable to approximately 37 different known attack vectors. Your encryption is outdated, your firewalls are misconfigured, and your employee password protocols are essentially non-existent. But we passed our last audit, Brad protested weakly. When was that audit conducted? 3 years ago. By whom? I think it was an in-house review. I looked at Derek. You told your investors your security was solid. I thought it was, Derek said defensively. Brad said everything was fine. Brad looked like he might cry. I mean, we hadn't had any problems. You haven't had any problems you know about, I corrected. Our forensic analysis found evidence of 3 separate intrusion attempts in the past 6 months. 2 of them succeeded in accessing your network, but the attackers apparently didn't find anything worth stealing. Yet, Margaret added quietly. Yet, I agreed. Derek was reading through the report, his face growing progressively more pale. This says we could face regulatory fines up to $50 million if there's a breach. That's conservative, I said. It doesn't account for legal fees, client lawsuits, or reputation damage. A breach of this magnitude could realistically end your company. The room fell silent. Brad was openly sweating now. Margaret was taking notes, her expression grim. Derek just sat there, the report open in front of him, reality crashing down around his carefully constructed world. Can you fix it? He asked finally, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Yes. How long? Complete overhaul? 6 months minimum. We'd need to rebuild your entire infrastructure from the ground up. 6 months, Derek repeated. And the cost? I named a figure that made Brad gasp and Derek's face go white. That's... Derek struggled for words. That's almost our entire profit margin for the year. It's also significantly less than what a breach would cost you, I pointed out. And frankly, you don't have a choice. If you don't address this immediately, you're one malicious email away from bankruptcy. Margaret closed her notebook. He's right, Derek. We need to do this. With my brother's company? Derek's voice carried a note of something, resentment maybe, or wounded pride. With the best cybersecurity firm we can afford, Margaret corrected. The fact that it's Alex's company is irrelevant. What matters is protecting our clients and our business. Derek looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I could see him trying to reconcile the IT guy brother with the CEO sitting across from him, the one who'd just calmly explained how his entire business was hanging by a thread. Why didn't you tell me, he asked, about your company, about any of this? Would it have changed anything? I don't know. Maybe. Derek, I said carefully, at your investor meeting, you introduced me as someone who fixes computers. You told a room full of people that I do typical IT work. You implied I'd never moved into management because I wasn't capable of it. He had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't mean. You did mean it. That's how you see me. That's how you've always seen me. That's not fair. Isn't it? Kept my voice level. Every family dinner, every holiday, every time we're together, the conversation is about your achievements. Your deals, your growth, your success. Nobody ever asks about my work because you've all decided it's not as important. Alex. I'm not angry, I interrupted, and I meant it. I'm just stating facts. You've spent years dismissing what I do, and now you're in a position where you desperately need what I do. It's ironic, that's all. Margaret was watching this exchange with open fascination. Brad just looked confused. Derek set down the report, his hands flat on the table. You're right. I've been dismissive. I didn't understand what you were doing, so I assumed it wasn't as complex or impressive as what I was doing. That was wrong. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from Derek. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was something. So what happens now? He asked. Now you decide. Atlas can rebuild your security infrastructure, but it will require your full cooperation. We'll need access to all your systems, complete transparency about your operations, and authority to make necessary changes even if they're disruptive. Disruptive how? We'll need to temporarily shut down certain systems, implement new protocols, retrain your entire staff. It won't be comfortable, but it's necessary. And if we don't? Derek asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. Then eventually, maybe in a month, maybe in a year, someone with malicious intent will find the same vulnerabilities we found. They'll exploit them, steal your data, and destroy everything you've built. Your investors will sue you. Your clients will leave you. Your company will cease to exist. The bluntness of it seemed to physically impact Derek. He slumped in his chair, the usual confidence draining out of him. Not much of a choice, he muttered. No, I agreed. It's really not. Margaret stood up, extending her hand to me. We'll need a formal proposal and timeline. Can you have something ready by Monday? I'll have it ready by tomorrow morning. He smiled, impressed. Atlas really is one of the best, isn't it? We don't make that claim ourselves, I said, shaking her hand. But our clients seem to think so. Brad mumbled something about needing to check on servers and fled the room. Margaret followed more sedately, leaving Derek and me alone in the conference room. Derek was still staring at the report, his finger tracing the executive summary. 150 employees, he said quietly. Revenue in the... Jesus, Alex. You're running a $40 million company. 43 million last year, I corrected. We're projecting 52 for this year. And you never said anything. You never asked. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something other than his usual confidence. Vulnerability, maybe. Genuine curiosity. Why? Why what? Why keep it quiet? Why not? I don't know, rub it in our faces? Mom and Dad still think you work in some generic IT department somewhere. I considered the question. Because building Atlas wasn't about proving something to you or them. It was about building something that mattered, something I was proud of. Your approval or lack thereof didn't factor into it. That's... Derek searched for words. That's actually kind of mature. I'm 34 years old, Derek. Maturity shouldn't be surprising. He laughed, but it was a tired sound. I'm 37 and I'm just realizing how immature I've been. I started gathering my things, preparing to leave. Derek stood up, moving to block my path. Alex, wait. I need to... I should... He struggled and used to vulnerability. Thank you. For the audit. For being honest about how bad things are. For not just letting us fail. I'm doing this for your clients, I said. They deserve to have their data protected, even if your company didn't prioritize it. The words were harsh, but Derek didn't flinch. Fair. But still. Thank you. I nodded, stepping around him toward the door. Will you tell them? Derek asked suddenly. Mom and Dad. About Atlas. I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter? I think. Derek hesitated. Think they should know. I think I should have known. Well, I said, opening the door. Now you do. I left him standing in the conference room, alone with the report that detailed exactly how close his company had come to catastrophic failure. As I walked back to my office, my phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. How'd it go with the brother? About as expected, I typed back. Prepare the proposal for Thompson and Associates. Complete infrastructure overhaul, 6-month timeline. That's a big project. You sure you want to take it? I thought about Derek's face when he realized the scope of the disaster he'd been courting. I thought about years of dismissive comments and casual condescension. I thought about the satisfaction of being undeniably, critically necessary. I'm sure I replied. This one's personal. The next 3 weeks were a blur of planning, preparation, and increasing panic from Derek's team as they began to understand the magnitude of the security overhaul. I assigned my best team to the project. Not as a favor to Derek, but because the work demanded expertise and because I took pride in every job Atlas undertook. Meanwhile, word had apparently gotten back to my parents about the meeting. My mother called on a Wednesday evening, her voice pitched with confusion. Alex, honey, Derek said something about you running a company. A technology company. That's correct. But you've never. We thought you worked for someone else. In their IT department. No, Mom. I've been CEO of Atlas Technology Solutions for 8 years. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, 8 years. Yes. And you never told us? I tried to a few times. You always seemed more interested in Derek's sales numbers. More silence. I could hear my father's voice in the background asking what was going on. My mother explained, her voice faint with shock. Your father wants to know how big this company is. Tell him we're doing about $50 million in revenue this year with 150 employees across 3 offices. I heard her relay this information. A muffled exclamation from my father. Alex, my mother said slowly, why didn't you make us understand? Why didn't you insist we pay attention? Because I shouldn't have to insist, Mom. You're my parents. You should have been interested enough to ask. That's. She trailed off. That's fair, actually. We've been terrible, haven't we? You've been focused on Derek. It's what you've always done. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed. It's not. My father took the phone. Son, we need to talk about this properly. Can you come to dinner this weekend? I'm pretty busy with Derek's project. Please, my father said, and the word was so uncharacteristic that it stopped me cold. My father didn't say please. My father made pronouncements and expected compliance. Okay, I said finally. Saturday. Thank you. And Alex? We're proud of you. We should have said that years ago. The words should have felt satisfying. Instead they just felt hollow. Too little, too late, motivated not by genuine understanding but by the revelation of my success. See you Saturday, I said and ended the call. Jennifer poked her head into my office. Everything okay? Family drama. The brothers' company. And parents who just discovered I'm not actually a low-level IT worker. She winced sympathetically. How'd they take it? With appropriate shock and belated pride. I turned back to my computer, pulling up the Thompson and Associates project timeline. How's the team doing with Phase 1? Good. Brad, their IT manager, is actually pretty sharp once you get past the fear. He's been helpful identifying the worst vulnerabilities. That's something at least. Derek's been in every day, Jennifer added carefully. Watching, asking questions. Actually trying to understand what we're doing. Character development, I said dryly. Maybe. Jennifer sat down across from me. For what it's worth, I think this project is good for you. Not just professionally, personally. Sometimes people need to see you fully to understand what they've been missing. Philosophical today, aren't we? I have my moments. She stood up, heading for the door. Don't stay too late. The work will still be here tomorrow. After she left, I sat in the quiet office looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably at his own office watching my team tear apart and rebuild his company's infrastructure. Probably wondering how he'd missed so much, how his little brother had built something this substantial while he was busy collecting sales awards and investor meetings. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Team says Phase 1 is ahead of schedule. That's good, right? Very good, I replied. Means we found the problems faster than expected. Which means there were a lot of problems. Yes. A pause, then I really had no idea how bad it was. Thank you for catching it. I stared at the message, considering my response. The old Alex would have brushed off the thanks, minimized his own contribution, made it easy for Derek to go back to underestimating him. But I wasn't that Alex anymore. Maybe I never should have been. You're welcome, I typed. This is what we do. This is what I've built. It's not just IT work. It's not fixing computers. It's protecting companies from catastrophic failure. I know that now. I'm sorry it took this to make me see it. Better late than never. Another pause, longer this time. Then, will you really come to dinner on Saturday? Mom's been worried you'll cancel. I'll be there. Thank you. And Alex, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done. Not just for my company, but everything. You deserve recognition. I smiled slightly at the screen. Derek was trying in his own way. It wasn't enough to erase years of dismissiveness, but it was a start. See you Saturday, I sent back. I closed my laptop and stood up, stretching muscles tight from hours at a desk. Through the window, I could see the city lights spreading out in all directions, thousands of companies and offices and data centers, all of them needing the kind of protection and expertise that Atlas provided. This was my world. This was what I'd built while Derek was collecting sales awards and my parents were asking if I'd fixed any interesting computers lately. They were about to get a comprehensive lesson in exactly what their youngest son had accomplished. And this time they were going to pay attention, whether they liked it or not. Saturday dinner was a different affair than usual. My parents' dining room felt smaller somehow, or maybe I just took up more space now that they knew the truth. Derek arrived with Margaret. A power move on his part, I suspected, bringing someone who could testify to my competence. My mother had cooked my favorite meal, which was touching in its transparency. My father actually asked about my day before launching into any other topics. Small gestures but significant. So, my father began once we were all seated. Atlas Technology Solutions. I looked it up. Very impressive portfolio of clients. Thank you. Several Fortune 500 companies, government contracts, international clients. We've been fortunate. Derek tells us you're rebuilding his entire security infrastructure. That's correct. My mother set down her fork. Alex, honey, why didn't you tell us about all this? Here we go, I thought. I tried to, Mom. Several times. Remember last Christmas when I mentioned I'd acquired a competitor? You said, "That's nice, dear," and immediately asked Derek about his sales numbers. She had the grace to look ashamed. I don't remember that. I do. Derek spoke up. He's right, Mom. I've been thinking about it all week. Every family dinner we talk about my deals, my clients, my success. We never really asked Alex what he was doing. We just assumed it wasn't as important. Because you told us he worked in IT, my father said, a note of defensiveness in his voice. He does work in IT, Margaret interjected smoothly. He's just the CEO of an IT company. There's a bit of a difference between that and what you were imagining. Obviously, my father muttered. The thing is, Derek continued, and I could see he'd been rehearsing this, Alex built something incredible. While I was focused on sales and growth, he was building a company that's actually more successful than mine. More revenue, more employees, more impact. And he did it quietly, without bragging or demanding attention. Unlike someone at this table, my mother said, looking pointedly at Derek. Unlike me, Derek agreed without rancor. I've spent years bragging about every achievement, and Alex has spent years actually achieving things without mentioning them. So why not mention them? My father asked me directly. Why keep it all secret? It wasn't secret, I said. It was private. There's a difference. I didn't hide my success. I just didn't push it on people who weren't interested in hearing about it. We would have been interested. Would you? I interrupted gently. Be honest, Dad. If I'd told you 5 years ago that I was starting a technology company, what would you have said? He opened his mouth, then closed it. We both knew the answer. He would have smiled, said something vaguely encouraging, and then asked Derek about his quarterly earnings. That's what I thought, I said. The table fell silent. My mother was crying quietly. Derek was studying his plate. Margaret looked like she wished she were anywhere else. We've failed you, my father said finally, his voice rough. As parents, we've completely failed you. You haven't failed me, I said, and I meant it. You just didn't see me clearly. But that's not actually your fault. I could have demanded to be seen. I could have made you pay attention. I chose not to because I was building something for myself, not for your approval. But we should have given you approval anyway, my mother said. We should have been proud, been interested, been supportive. You're right, I agreed. You should have. But you weren't, and I survived it. I thrived, actually. I built Atlas without your support, which means it's entirely mine. There's something powerful about that. Derek looked up. Is that why you did it? To prove you didn't need us? No, I said honestly. I did it because I saw a market need and I had the skills to fill it. Your opinions never really factored into my business decisions. That might sound harsh, but it's the truth. My father leaned back in his chair, looking older than I'd ever seen him. When did you become so independent? So self-sufficient? Probably around the time I realized I wasn't going to get what I needed from this family, I said. So I built my own life, my own success, my own support system. Atlas is mine in a way nothing else has ever been mine. And we missed all of it, my mother whispered. Yes, I said simply. You did. Margaret cleared her throat. If I may offer an outside perspective, what Alex has built is remarkable not just in scale but in reputation. Atlas is known in the industry for integrity, expertise, and innovation. That doesn't happen by accident. That's the result of consistent excellence and ethical leadership. Thank you, I said, genuinely appreciating her support. I'm not blowing smoke, Margaret continued, looking at my parents. I've been in corporate management for 15 years. I know what good leadership looks like. Your son is exceptional at what he does. You should be enormously proud. We are, my father said quickly. We are proud, Alex. Even if we haven't shown it properly. I appreciate that. Can we? My mother hesitated. Can we start over? Pay attention properly this time. I considered the question carefully. Could they? Could this family fundamentally change its dynamics after years of established patterns? I don't know, I said honestly. But we can try. Derek raised his water glass. To trying. And to my brother, who turned out to be considerably more impressive than I ever gave him credit for. We all drank to that. It wasn't resolution, not really. It wasn't a magical healing of years of dismissiveness and neglect. But it was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement was a start. After dinner, Derek pulled me aside while our parents were clearing dishes. The team says we'll be fully operational with the new security infrastructure by month 5, he said. Ahead of schedule. That's the plan. I've been thinking about recommending Atlas to some of my contacts. Other companies in our sector who probably need similar work. That's generous. It's strategic, Derek corrected with a slight smile. If my competitors get breached because of bad security, it reflects poorly on the whole industry. Better if everyone's protected. Pragmatic, I said. I like it. I learned from the best. He paused. That would be you in case that wasn't clear. I laughed, surprised. Message received. I mean it, though. The way you've built Atlas, the reputation you've developed, the quality of your work. It's impressive. More impressive than anything I've done. You've done well for yourself, Derek. I've done adequately. You've done exceptionally. There's a difference. We stood there in the hallway, two brothers who'd spent years talking past each other, finally starting to actually communicate. Think we can make this work? Derek asked. The family dynamic, I mean. Now that everyone knows the truth. Honestly, I have no idea. But I'm willing to find out. That's all I can ask. Derek extended his hand. Partners. I shook it. Partners. My phone buzzed. Jennifer with an urgent message. Data core merger just got complicated. Need your call with their CO ASAP. I showed Derek the message. Duty calls. CO stuff? CO stuff, I confirmed. Go, Derek said. Save the merger. Do the important work that someone who just fixes computers definitely can't do. I smiled at the callback. I'll see you next week for the Phase 3 review. I'll actually pay attention this time, Derek promised. Really try to understand what you're doing. That would be nice, I said, and I meant it. I left my parents' house feeling lighter than I had in years. Nothing was fixed, not really. Years of family dynamics didn't reverse overnight. But something had shifted. They saw me now. Really saw me. Not as the disappointing son who worked in IT, but as someone who'd built something significant. As I drove back toward my office, my city spreading out around me in a grid of lights and possibilities, I thought about identity and recognition. About building something for yourself versus building something for others' approval. This was mine. Every line of code, every security protocol, every client relationship. I'd built it without their help, without their recognition, without their pride. And that made it more valuable somehow. More real. Their belated acknowledgement was gratifying, sure. But it wasn't necessary. I'd already proven everything I needed to prove. To myself. And in the end, that was the only audience that really mattered.